November 8, 1942. 2:15 a.m. Casablanca Harbor, French Morocco. The first landing craft ground against sand. American boots hit African soil. Photographers ready. History, they believed, was beginning now. 400 m east in the Egyptian desert, Lieutenant James Crawford checked his watch. 3:15 a.m. local time. 16 days into the battle, his 8th Army Sherman tank, call sign Defiant, had just helped break RML's line at El Alamein. 16 days of fighting. 16 days that had already turned the war. But Crawford's hands didn't shake from exhaustion. They shook because he understood something that would take decades to articulate. The cameras weren't pointing his way. They never would be. Look at the image at the top of this video. 4 soldiers, 4 nations, 1 circled. You assumed something about who did what, didn't you? That assumption, that reflexive certainty about which flag won which battle wasn't an accident. It was architecture. If you're watching this, hit subscribe. We're about to dismantle 70 years of very expensive storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're watching from. I want to know how far this forgotten truth needs to travel. That photograph you saw, those 4 soldiers standing in the ruins, represented something true. Allied cooperation, shared sacrifice, victory earned together. But the story that photograph would tell in cinemas, in textbooks, in national memory would be something else entirely. Not a lie exactly, just a very selective truth. Britain won battles that Hollywood gave to America. Not through malice, not through conspiracy, through something more insidious. Market dominance meeting human nature's preference for simple narratives. This is how it happened. This is what was lost and this is why it still matters. The war ended in 1945. The rewriting began in 1946. Not with speeches or government decrees, with scripts, with studio contracts, with distribution deals that flooded the world's cinemas with one nation's version of victory. Hollywood had something Britain lacked. An undamaged industrial base, unlimited resources, and the world's most sophisticated propaganda machine, though no one called it that anymore. They called it entertainment. The formula was efficient. Take a real battle. Change the Proagonians. Keep enough facts that it feels true. Compress timelines. Manufacture perfect heroic moments. Export globally. Within a generation, the manufactured memory replaces the lived experience for everyone who wasn't there. British veterans watched it happen in real time. George Marston, Lancaster bomber pilot, sat in a Leeds cinema in 1948 watching a film about the strategic bombing campaign. On screen, American B-17s destroyed German industry while British forces provided support. Marston had flown 63 missions over Germany. He'd watched friends incinerate at 20,000 feet. He'd helped carry the bombing campaign for 3 years before American heavy bombers arrived in numbers. He left before the film ended. Didn't speak about it for 40 years. That silence replicated across millions of British veterans created a vacuum. Hollywood filled it. The mechanics were simple. America had 12 major film studios producing hundreds of films per year. Britain had 3, operating under austerity rationing. By 1950, 80% of films shown in British cinemas were American. The Soviet Union and half of Europe were behind the Iron Curtain, locked out of Western media. Asia and Africa were emerging from colonialism, hungry for modern culture. Everyone watched the same stories. Everyone learned the same history. Everyone remembered the same war. Except it wasn't the war that happened. British children in the 1960s learned about D-Day from American films. They learned about North Africa from American films. They learned about the defeat of fascism from American films. Their grandparents, who'd actually been there, stayed quiet. What was the point? Who argues with a movie? The propaganda versus reality gap wasn't created by evil men in dark rooms. It was created by economic logic, soft power, and the very human tendency to center yourself in every story you tell. Britain had won battles that determined the war's outcome. Within 20 years, those battles had dissolved into supporting roles, footnotes. British forces also participated lines in textbooks. Here's what actually happened. October 23, 1942. 9:40 p.m. El Alamein, Egypt. 955 British artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously. The desert sky turned orange. 4:15 minutes, shells fell on Axis positions at a rate of sustained thunder, then silence, then whistles. Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army, 195,000 men strong, advanced into the smoke. This is the battle that changed everything. Not D-Day, not the Battle of the Bulge. This one, October 1942, in Egyptian sand. Here's what Montgomery faced. Irwin IML's Africa. Corse and Italian forces entrenched in the strongest defensive positions in North Africa. 500,000 mines laid in patterns specifically designed to channel British tanks into killing zones. Rommel had pushed to within 70 miles of Alexandria. If he broke through, Egypt falls. The Suez falls. The entire Middle East oil supply falls. Britain loses the war. The battle lasted 12 days. Day 1. British sappers cleared gaps through minefields under machine gun fire. Soldiers marked safe paths with white tape. Tanks rolled through single file exposed while German 88mm guns hunted them. 23 British tanks destroyed before dawn. Day 3. Australian 9th Division launched a diversionary attack at Tel Isa. Hand-to-hand fighting in trenches, bayonets, entrenching tools. The kind of savagery that doesn't make it into films. Day 5. RML counterattacked with panzers. British anti-tank gunners held. 17-year-old gunner Thomas Webb from Cardiff destroyed 3 German tanks before his gun was hit. He survived. His crew didn't. Day 8. Montgomery regrouped. Planned Operation Supercharge. Concentrated everything on a 4-mile front. Gambled the entire campaign on one massive punch. Day 11. The German line broke. Rommel retreated. The undefeated Desert Fox defeated. The 8th Army pursued 500m. Tripoli fell. Tunisia fell. By May 1943, North Africa was secured. Montgomery's beret became famous. The 2-badge insignia worn at a deliberately cocky angle. Soldiers touched it for luck. Photographers shot it from every angle. Churchill wore one during his visit. That beret symbolized something. British resilience, British leadership, British victory when victory had seemed impossible. Now, here's what American forces were doing on October 23, 1942, when Montgomery's artillery barrage began. Planning Operation Torch, the American landings in French Morocco and Algeria launched on November 8, 16 days after El Maine started. 3 days after Rommel began retreating, American forces landed largely unopposed. Vichy French resistance collapsed within 3 days. American casualties in the entire Torch operation, 526 killed. British casualties at El Maine, 13,500 killed, wounded and missing. The Americans fought bravely in Tunisia in early 1943. They learned hard lessons at Kasserine Pass where IML blooded inexperienced American troops. They improved. They contributed. But Alamein, the battle that decided North Africa, was British. Churchill called it the turning point. Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat. Now, pause for a moment and drop a comment. Have you actually heard of Alamein? Did you learn about it in school? I need to know how thoroughly this battle has vanished from memory. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We're just getting started. Hollywood's version arrived in 1943 with Sahara starring Humphrey Bogart. American tank crew in a Libya solo heroics. By the 1960s and 70s, North Africa films centered American experiences. The Desert Rats 1953 reduced Montgomery to a supporting character. Patton 1970 suggested American leadership saved the campaign. The beret vanished from cultural memory. Montgomery became a punchline remembered only for Market Garden failure in 1944. His Le Maine triumph forgotten. The lie doesn't have to be explicit. It just has to be consistent. September 3, 1939. 11:15 a.m. Greenwich. Meanwhile, Britain declared war on Germany. Within hours, German U-boat U-30 torpedoed passenger liner SS Afnia, killing 117 civilians. The Battle of the Atlantic began immediately. December 7, 1941. 7:55 a.m. Honolulu time. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. America entered the war. 27 months after Britain had started fighting alone. For 27 months, Britain fought the U-boat solo. 27 months is 821 days. Every single one of those days, merchant sailors died in the North Atlantic, keeping Britain alive. The numbers are staggering. Between September 1939 and December 1941, German U-boats sank 1,295 Allied ships. The vast majority were British or sailing to British ports. 30,248 merchant seamen died. They died in water cold enough to kill in 4 minutes. They died trapped in sinking hulls. They died of exposure in lifeboats that drifted for weeks. Convoy HX-84, November 1940. 38 merchant ships escorted by one armed merchant cruiser HMS Jarvis Bay. They encountered German pocket battleship Admiral Scheer. Outgunned, outranged, completely doomed. Jarvis Bay's captain ordered the convoy to scatter while he attacked the battleship alone. Captain Edward Fagan charged a warship 10 times more powerful than his converted liner. For 22 minutes, Jarvis Bay burned and fought long enough for the convoy to escape. 32 of 38 ships survived. Fagan died at his post. Victoria Cross awarded posthumously. That's one convoy, one day. One heroic sacrifice in a battle that lasted 275 days. Britain developed the convoy system, refined the tactics, invented the technologies that would win. AIC sonar, radar-equipped aircraft, depth charge patterns, hedgehog mortars, the tactical brilliance of Western approaches command. Most critically, Bletchley Park broke Enigma, the German naval code. British mathematicians and code reekers led by Alan Turing cracked it in 1941. By 1943, they were reading U-boat signals faster than some German commanders. This gave convoy commanders the ability to route around wolf packs. It changed everything. American cryptologists contributed. American destroyers helped escort. But the strategic victory in the Atlantic, the reason Britain survived to become the staging ground for D-Day, was British. When American forces arrived in numbers in 1942, they initially made things worse. Their ships sailed illuminated, refused blackouts, creating a second happy time for U-boat off the American East Coast. German submarines sank 609 ships in American waters in 6 months before American forces adapted British tactics. The Battle of the Atlantic officially ended in May 1945. 72,200 Allied seamen had died. 3,500 merchant ships lost. 783 U-boat destroyed. Victory was systematic, technological, achieved through incremental advantages and grinding perseverance. Britain's Merchant Navy and Royal Navy won it. America helped win it. Hollywood made it American. Action in the North Atlantic, 1943, starred Humphrey Bogart on an American Liberty ship. The Enemy Below, 1957, featured American destroyers hunting U-boat. Greyhound 2020 showed Tom Hanks commanding convoy escorts, never mind that the majority of escort commanders through 1943 were British. The symbolic objects tell the truth. Walk through any British naval museum. Glass cases filled with convoy medals. Dented ship's bells recovered from wrecks. Sextants used for 50 Atlantic crossings. Each one represents a man who fought when fighting meant probable death. And no guarantee anyone would remember. Those men watched American films about the battle they'd survived and saw strangers' faces wearing their victory. March 6, 1944. 4XMI infile Manipur Northeast India Japanese artillery began firing on British positions. Operation Yugo. Japan's attempt to invade India had started within weeks. 155,000 Japanese troops would encircle 2 British divisions at Eiffel and 1 at Kohima. The siege lasted 4 months. You've never heard of it, have you? And Kohima represent the largest defeat Japan ever suffered in battle. More Japanese soldiers died there than in any other land campaign. 53,000 Japanese dead. The Japanese advance into India shattered permanently. The road to Burma reopened. British forces 5th Army under General William Slim, including British, Indian, and African divisions, achieved this in monsoon rain with disease killing as many men as bullets, supplied entirely by air because roads didn't exist. The fighting at Kohima came down to a tennis court. Literally, the Deputy Commissioner's tennis court became the front line. British and Japanese positions were separated by the width of a clay court. They threw grenades at each other across the net posts. Hand-to-hand fighting in the rhododendrons. This lasted 16 days. Every morning, soldiers from the Dorsetshire Regiment fixed bayonets and charged uphill into Japanese machine guns to secure the water supply. Every night, Japanese infiltrators attacked wounded men in the hospital. April 18, Royal West Kent held a position called Garrison Hill. Surrounded, running out of ammunition, wounded, lying in dugouts with no morphine. They held for 13 days. When relief arrived, survivors couldn't stand. They'd forgotten what it felt like to not be under fire. The accumulation of small moments defines this campaign. Tea rations issued even when no other supplies got through. Mules carrying ammunition up vertical jungle tracks. Sergeants calmly reorganizing defensive lines while Japanese soldiers were 50 yards away. Letters home that said everything's fine. While the writers had dysentery and jungle rot, Slim's 14th Army became the forgotten army even during the war. No correspondence, no cameras, no newsreels. Burma wasn't glamorous. It was disease and mud and an enemy that fought with suicidal ferocity. But they won. By February 1945, British forces had driven the Japanese out of Burma entirely. Rangoon fell in May. The Japanese army in Southeast Asia, once considered unbeatable, had been methodically destroyed by British-led forces that received almost no recognition. American forces were present in Burma. Merrill's Marauders, 3,000 men, fought bravely in northern Burma. The American-trained Chinese divisions contributed, but scale matters. The British the Fourth Army at peak strength numbered 750,000 men, British and Commonwealth casualties. In the Burma campaign 71,244 American casualties in Burma, approximately 1,300. Ask any American about the Pacific War, they'll mention Ioma Midway Okinawa. Ask about Burma blank stares. Hollywood's Burma barely existed. Merrill's Marauders 1962 portrayed the American operation. That's about it. The British perspective. Vanished veterans of the 14th Army spent decades being asked what they did in the war. Burma, they'd say, where's that? Came the reply. The forgotten army stayed forgotten. The Burma Star, the campaign medal, became a symbol of invisible service. Men wore it knowing almost no one understood what it represented. That hurt differently than being wounded. Being wounded proves you were there. Being forgotten suggests you never mattered. Late evening, exact date unknown. Somewhere in England, 1970s, James Crawford, retired lieutenant, 8th Army, sat in his living room watching television, a documentary about World War II. American narrator, American perspective. Elamin received 4 minutes described as British forces achieving a victory that enabled American operations in North Africa. Enabled. Not saved Egypt, not turned the tide, not broke IML. Enabled. Crawford turned it off. His wife asked why. He couldn't articulate it. How do you explain that something stolen from you wasn't an object, but a narrative, a place in history, a recognition of what you'd endured? This is the question that haunts this entire story. If the battles are erased, if the victories are reassigned, if the suffering is forgotten, what else have we lost? The first loss is personal. The veterans who came home, who tried to speak about what they'd done, who encountered indifference or misunderstanding or active contradiction. I thought the Americans did that became a phrase that ended conversations. Why argue? Who wants to seem bitter or attention-seeking? So they stopped talking. Their grandchildren learned about the war from films and television. The cultural memory diverged from the lived experience. Within 2 generations, British children couldn't name the battles their grandfathers had won. The second loss is historical. Truth isn't relative, but memory is collective. When the collective memory diverges from truth, the truth becomes academic, something only historians know. It stops being real. Wars are decided by battles. Battles are won by soldiers. Soldiers deserve to be remembered for the battles they won. This isn't nationalism. It's basic human dignity. You don't have to diminish American sacrifice to acknowledge British victory. But Hollywood's narrative did exactly that because zero-sum thinking creates better drama. The third loss is strategic. The real Allied partnership during WITS was complex, often fractious, sometimes brilliant. Britain carried the war alone for 2 years, then worked alongside America from 1941-1945. American industrial might and manpower were decisive. British intelligence, strategic experience, and early sacrifices were equally decisive. That partnership with all its tensions and compromises and genuine collaboration is the story worth telling. But it's complicated. It requires nuance. It doesn't fit on a poster. So Hollywood simplified it. In doing so, it made the actual story more interesting, more human, more true, inaccessible. Interviews with veterans in the 1990s and 2000s before they died captured this loss. George Marston, the Lancaster pilot, finally spoke on camera in 1995. "I don't blame the Americans," he said. "I blame the silence. We won battles and we said nothing. We came home and got on with it. That's the British way, isn't it? Stiff upper lip. Don't complain. But maybe sometimes you should say, I was there. I did this. It mattered." Montgomery's beret sits in the Imperial War Museum. Convoy medals fill drawers in forgotten houses. Burma stars gather dust. These objects remain physical proof that something happened. But objects don't correct narratives. Only people do. The reckoning requires asking, what do we owe the past? Just accuracy or something more? Acknowledgement, gratitude, the willingness to complicate our comfortable stories. Post-war British identity struggled with victory. The empire was ending. The economy was shattered. The role of global superpower was transferring to America. In that context, insisting on credit for battles seemed petty, even embarrassing. Better to focus forward. But silence doesn't serve history. It serves whoever speaks loudest. American soft power, cultural, economic, narrative dominated the post-war world. Not through conquest, but through distribution. The story America told became the story everyone heard. That story needed American heroes, American victories, American centrality. Britain's role became the plucky ally. Important, respected, but fundamentally supporting. Never leading, never decisive, never the reason victory was possible. That wasn't the war that happened. The war that happened included El Maine, where Britain broke Ramel before America arrived. The Atlantic, where British escorts and coteries kept supply lines open while America was neutral. Burma, where British forces destroyed the Japanese army in conditions so horrific they made the Pacific Island campaigns look comfortable. These weren't minor engagements. They were turning points. They enabled everything that came after. November 8, 2024, present day. A historian in London opens a file of letters from the 8th Army. A teacher in Cardiff plans a lesson on the Battle of the Atlantic. A grandson in Yorkshire holds his grandfather's Burma star and finally asks what it means. The correction happens slowly, one person at a time. One story recovered from obscurity. Power writes history, but truth persists. It persists in archives, in museums, in the stubborn memories of families who refuse to let their grandfathers vanish. It persists in uncomfortable facts that don't fit the narrative but won't be ignored. Britain won battles America takes credit for, not because Americans stole them. Because narrative momentum, once established, becomes truth unless actively challenged. Challenge it. Subscribe if this matters to you. Leave a comment with where you're watching from and whether you learned about these battles in school. Share this with someone who thinks they know the whole story of World War II. Because every person who learns what actually happened is one more person who can pass it forward. The soldiers in that photograph at the beginning, all 4 of them deserve to be remembered for what they actually did. Not for a simplified version, not for a marketable narrative, for the truth. Truth is more complicated than cinema. It's messier, less satisfying, full of shared credit and mutual dependence. But it's also more human. And it's ours to remember if we choose to. That's the real victory. Not winning battles, but ensuring those battles. And the men who fought them never truly die. Remember Alamein. Remember the Atlantic. Remember Burma. Remember,